As Emily was saying, sin is such an outdated word. We are so over that word. In fact, I wanted to share a graph that I got from Google about usage of the word. So let me see if I can grab that here. So here is the frequency of the word sin from 1800 to 2019. And as you can see, it just plummets. And that was a long time ago, like a century ago. There's an uptick there at the end. Not sure what's going on there, but it's still way, way down from its high point. We just don't use the word anymore. It's an ugly word. And didn't we all learn a long time ago that sin really just means missing the mark? I would hazard a guess that almost all of us have at one time or another wisely informed people of that fact. Not only have we ourselves stopped using it, we don't hear our enlightened teachers use the word sin either. The word sin clearly represents, in our eyes, a more primitive stage in humanity's development. And especially we spiritual folk have advanced beyond it. Yet, A Course in Miracles talks about it all the time. My talk today is based on the section, What is Sin, in part 2 of the workbook. This is a section that we are supposed to read when you're at that spot in the workbook every day for 10 days. And the section has just absolutely grabbed me lately. If you're attending Marianne's workbook classes, she's going to be covering it this coming Friday. So I checked it out with her if it'd be okay if I covered it as well. And she was perfectly fine with it. It's really been grabbing me. To understand why the Course puts so much focus on sin, we're going to need to open our minds. We often assume that since truth is one, anything that is true, we will naturally hear through a whole list of masters and mystics and channels. But what if instead we are a young species? And many of the most important truths have so far not been voiced. The Course in this section, What is Sin, it tells us something we are not going to hear anywhere else. I think it's safe to say that. Yet it's not only at the heart of the Course's teaching, it also makes a surprising amount of sense. So let's open our minds and be ready to hear something new. It may be hard to take in at first, because I think the grooves in our brain are not yet laid down. So this is probably going to be a little bit disorienting. I'll say I'm disoriented. But let's try to make this a start, a beginning of those grooves being laid down. So, why does the Course talk so much about sin? The reason is that the concept is at the foundation of our thought system. It doesn't matter if you were or weren't raised in church. It doesn't matter if you're spiritual or religious or an atheist. It doesn't even matter if you're human. And we'll see that shortly. We all have the concept, and our minds are saturated with it. So, what is that concept? I think we can break it down into 5 parts. Let me go ahead and share another slide here. Slides are kind of basic, so please forgive me. Okay. So here is my understanding of the concept of sin, and see if you can track me through the process. Number 1, someone does something hurtful or destructive. 2, for the sake of their own gain. As a result, they become less worthy of love. Instead, they deserve some form of payback for what they've done. And finally, the only question is, will justice catch up with them? Shoot. Did I change the slide? So look at those points. We all know this pattern. It is deeply familiar to us. Do you have to believe in God to buy into that pattern? No, of course not. Do you have to be a human being? I don't think so. The fact is, even primates recognize this concept. And I want to show you a clip that shows that. Okay, where am I? All right. Oh wait, I didn't share my sound. That was somehow Emily's fault. Okay, let me get this right. Some of you may have seen this. It's from a TED Talk, and there's these two monkeys, okay? And the researcher is feeding the monkey on the left a cucumber in response for a little task. They give the monkey a stone, the monkey gives the stone back, okay, and then gets a reward. And for the one on the left, the reward's a cucumber, okay? And for the one on the right, the reward is a much sweeter, more satisfying grape for the exact same task. Okay. And the one on the left, in the first time around, is happy with the cucumber. So just watch what happens here.
So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again.
Okay, you get the idea. So, was that monkey raised in church? Has she been taught about God? Does she know the word sin? Of course not. Does she know the concept of sin? Obviously, she does. Okay, she has decided that researcher has been unfair to her and attacks the researcher. Okay, it's a great scene. So I want us to look at those 5 steps again. Okay. Just look at those steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That pattern consumes our lives. It's in nearly all the stories we read. It's at the heart of most of the situations we talk about. How many countless hours have we spent processing with others what our unbearable spouse or boss or in-law has done? And it's no surprise, therefore, that this pattern lies at the heart of the fictional stories we consume. I just finished watching the series Breaking Bad with Emily and my kids. And these 5 points are the backbone of the whole show. Go ahead and stop the screen share now. You can think about just about any story. And that's true. Think of all the crime stories we consume. Think about the last show that you watched. Wasn't it about, at least in part, who did wrong and who's going to pay for it? And it's not just fiction. Think of the stories we follow in the news. Right now, the whole world is following the Trump indictments. And those 5 points are obviously at the heart of that story. Even if you're on the right end of the political spectrum and you see the bad guy as the Justice Department or the justice system, those 5 points are still central for you. We eat these 5 points for breakfast and lunch and dinner every day. So please, let's not kid ourselves and say we have outgrown sin. This section, however, takes a massive step beyond what we've just seen. And here is where it gets mind-bending. Here's how the section begins. Okay, it opens by saying sin is insanity. It is the means by which the mind is driven mad and seeks to let illusions take the place of truth. And being mad, it sees illusions where the truth should be and where it really is. Now, I know that sounds a bit vague and confusing. I struggled for a long time to understand the import of those lines. But over the course of the next paragraphs, a sequence emerges. And it goes like this. I see it as having 4 parts. First, we invent a world of illusions, a physical world where sin is everywhere, on the front page of every newspaper, at the heart of every book of fiction, at the center of our private conversations. Second, we give ourselves a body in that world. The section says that. It says in paragraph 2, the body is the instrument the mind made in its striving to deceive itself. And that'll become clear as we go. Third, having given ourselves a body in this world, we give our body senses. Why? So they can perceive all the sin in this world. One of the most memorable and arresting lines in the section says, sin gave the body eyes. What a strange line. Sin gave the body eyes. Where else but in the course are you going to read a line like that? But its meaning is simple. Sin gave the body eyes so they could look on sin in the world. And they don't just look on it, they search for it. This section briefly alludes to that, but there's a very memorable image of it in the text. There in the text, in chapter 19, our eyes are likened to hungry hunting dogs that are sent out on a, quote, savage search for sin. So our eyes are actually hunting our environment, hunting for evidence of sin out there in the world. Now, that's a fascinating topic. We could talk a lot about it, but no one really needs to explain that to us. As soon as we hear that image of our eyes as these hunting dogs in search of sin in the world, we immediately recognize the truth in it. It's true, right? So we've invented a world of illusions full of sin. We gave ourselves a body in that world. We gave that body senses, and then including eyes. And then fourth, as our eyes look on the illusions of sin out there, those illusions become the proof that sin is real. This is the concluding part. You look at the headlines, you look at the images on the news, you read the history books, you watch your spouse leave their dirty plates unwashed. Or like Helen, you watch your husband leave his dirty socks on the coffee table. You listen to your friends confirm that your spouse is indeed awful. And you conclude what? That sin is obviously real. So let's look at these lines from the section. Share my screen again. Paragraph 3 says, sin is the home of all illusions, which but stand for things imagined. So the illusions stand for things in the mind that are imagined, issuing from thoughts which are untrue. They are the quote unquote proof that what has no reality is real. So those are the illusions our eyes see, right? The proof that what has no reality is real. What do they prove? Sin, quote unquote, proves God's Son is evil. Timelessness must have an end. Eternal life must die. So the illusions of the world are, quote unquote, proof that sin is real. They seem to prove God's Son, all of us, is evil. God's Son is evil. He's not giving you the grape. And so now he deserves not love, but punishment. He deserves justice to catch up with him and make him pay. At the very least, he deserves that cucumber to be thrown in his face. The big conclusion from all of this is sin is true. We have the proof. It's all around us. Now, this is a jarring and unsettling view of the world. Let's just admit it. It says we invented the world we see, and then a body with senses to apprehend the world as physical proof that sin is real. This is so different from any other view of the world out there. It's different from God creating the world and declaring it as good, right? It's different from the scientific view that we should be gazing at the universe in wonder. It's different from an ancient Indian view that I'm sure some of you know, that the world is God's play. It's his sport, his divine Leela. The view that we're talking about, you are not going to read that anywhere else. You have to admire its boldness and originality. You would have thought we had exhausted all the possible explanations for the world. Yet here is a brand new one. The course at least gets an A+ for creativity. But let's look at this more practically. If in fact we made the world for this purpose, let's face it, it has worked. Since the moment we were born, this world has been kneading sin, the idea of sin, into our tissues, injecting it into our veins, beaming it into our eyes. After decades of daily physical proof, how could we possibly doubt that sin is real? And we don't doubt it. Not really. Think of what a difficult struggle it can be to try to forgive someone. How long we can work at that. Think of how naive and dangerous even it can sound to say they didn't really sin. Think of all the voices these days telling us that unconditional forgiveness is not only unwise, but is some kind of debasement of oneself and one's dignity. If we made the world to convince us sin is real, it has worked at the deepest of levels and the most colossal of scales. It has worked. But this new picture the Course is giving us turns the tables. I'm going to shift here a bit. We're all familiar with systems that have been erected to convince those within the system of some big lie. If you're living in that system, you of course accept the big lie without question. But when you find out that the system was created to convince you of a lie, then suddenly you're free of it. finally you can stand outside of it and laugh at it. So, if, for instance, you were living in ancient Egypt, everything around you in your world said that the Pharaoh was handpicked by the gods to be the god's earthly vessel and then to become divine once he died. Okay. But what if you found out that the pharaohs set the whole society up to give you that illusion and that they're just ordinary men? Would that falsehood still have you in its grip, or would you be free of it? And this obviously is not an isolated example. We humans are always setting up systems to convince those in the system of certain falsehood. Every corporation tries to convince you, for instance, that it truly cares about you, the consumer, or you, its employee. And after all the commercials and all the company videos, that message unconsciously lodges itself in your brain. You almost can't help it. But at some point, if your eyes are open, you start to sense that the whole system is one big, carefully constructed lie. I mean, come on. McDonald's just wants to sell you burgers. It doesn't care about you and your happiness, regardless of what the commercials say. And aren't all of our systems kind of like that? I think the longer we live, we at least sense it. And I think that's why we have such fascination with stories that are built around this idea. And what comes to my mind, a lot of examples could come to mind. What I think of, though, first and foremost, is The Truman Show. And if you know the movie, from birth, Truman, played by Jim Carrey, grows up in a false world where everyone in his life is just an actor, acting like they care about him, even his parents. While unbeknownst to him, millions are watching him on TV. Giant TV set has been constructed. How would he not completely believe this world? He was born into it. But then, if you've seen the movie, and sorry for the spoilers if you haven't, holes start to appear. Okay, the first hole is when one of the spotlights from the ceiling of the set falls to the street right in front of him. And he's like, what is that? Then there's a column of rain that rains only on him. There's a radio channel he hears in his car that's precisely describing his movements. In fact, I wanted to play you that clip. As you can see in this clip, he's starting to process these clues. Share sound. Okay.
He's heading west on Stewart. Stand by all extras. Gloria, he'll be on you in about 90 seconds. Pops, make sure the coffee's hot. Okay, he's making his turn onto Lancaster Square. Oh my God! He nearly hit balance. Something's wrong. Change frequencies.
Ouch. Sorry about that, folks. I guess we picked up a police frequency or something. It sometimes happens.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you can see he's processing problems in the artificial world. And at some point, all that leads to the lie unveiling itself completely to him. And with complete resolve, he exits the system. We are Truman. We are living in a giant, carefully constructed system designed to convince us of a single big lie, the lie of sin. Being born into this system, how would we not believe it? And we have, and we do. But we have at least started following Truman's arc. For us, it was not a spotlight falling from the sky. It was a book. And this book is telling us, second here. And this book is telling us the real truth in plain English. After this many years in the system, it's very hard to fully believe the book, but it's also hard to fully reject. And it's slowly working its way into our minds. Now, the difference between us and Truman, of course, is he was put inside this system by someone else. We, in contrast, have been put inside the system by ourselves. And that's why the section goes on to use the language of game. So the world is not being done to us, it's a game we are playing. I want us to look at the fourth paragraph here. Here's what that fourth paragraph says. A madman's dreams, meaning ours, are frightening. And sin appears indeed to terrify. And yet what sin perceives is but a childish game. The Son of God may play. He has become a body, prey to evil and to guilt, with but a little life that ends in death. But all the while his Father shines on him and loves him with an everlasting love, which his pretenses cannot change at all. This is saying it's a big game that we are playing, but the truth lies in God's love, which doesn't alter one bit. As I mentioned, there's an ancient tradition in India that this world is God's game, but it's not. It's our game. Have you heard of the acronym MMORPG? You probably haven't. It stands for Massively Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Game. Massively Multiplayer Online Role-Playing Game. And that's essentially what this world is. Massive multiplayer role-playing game. The game of sin. But what does it mean to say that sin is not real? We need to look at that more closely. So I want us to go back to our 5 original points and contrast them with the truth. Okay. So on the left, we have the big lie of sin. And on the right, we have the real truth. Okay, so let's go across with each point and contrast the lie with the truth. So the lie is someone does something hurtful or destructive. The truth is you can't really, not in the ultimate sense, hurt anyone. For God created everyone changeless and invulnerable. Number 2, that is done. They do that for the sake of their own gain. The truth, though, is when you try to hurt someone, you don't gain, you lose. Number 3, the lie says, as a result, they become less worthy of love. But the truth is, you can't make yourself, no one can make themselves less worthy of love. God created you forever innocent, pure, and worthy. That can never change. That's the idea, I am as God created me. The lie says, number 4, instead they deserve some form of punishment or payback. But the truth says you can't deserve payback because you didn't do real ultimate harm. Finally, the lie says, number 5, the only question is, will justice catch up with them? The truth, though, says real justice is God's love. That's what everyone deserves. Love and justice are therefore the same. Love is justice. Justice is love. Now, this picture can take a lot to process. We don't have time to kind of camp here, but the Course is teaching that at every point along the way, The concept of sin is a lie. In light of what is truly real, it's not true. And that's why, as that paragraph said, all the while our Father shines on us and loves us with an everlasting love, not in spite of us being sinners, but because we are not. And now that we know this, we are in the position of all those protagonists in various stories who peeled back the curtain and stopped believing the lie. But to follow through with this will take a certain boldness, the boldness to free ourselves, even though everyone else is still believing the lie. And if you've seen The Truman Show, that's one of the things that's so great about Truman's character. After a lifetime of living in that system and knowing nothing else, he goes after those clues with real drive. He's willing to question everything. And he finally faces the fact that his wife is not his wife. She is just acting. And his best friend isn't his friend. He's just acting. That no one is who they seem. They're all actors. So we have to have our version of that same drive and that same boldness. We have to face that our spouse is not a sinner. They're just acting, even if they themselves don't realize that. And that our best friend is not a sinner. They too are just acting. And that even our favorite villains out there in the world are mere actors. And that, of course, we ourselves are also just acting. That literally no one is a sinner. That everyone is worthy of limitless love. That no one deserves even the tiniest withdrawal of love. If we could really accept that, we would enjoy a freedom beyond our imagination. People could go on attacking, go on behaving as they do, and we wouldn't love them any less. We would feel completely immune to anything they did. We wouldn't be constantly pointing out all the stuff they'd done wrong and thus poisoning our relationships. We'd therefore have far better relationships. We could hold our head high, no matter what mistakes we ourselves have made in this world. We would feel so clean and so innocent that no one could make us feel bad about ourselves. And the list of benefits could go on and on. So now that this book has fallen out of the sky, will we rise to the occasion and believe it, even at those moments when the acting is really convincing? Will we have the same drive to free ourselves that Truman did? Or will we opt for half measures and basically go on sleepwalking? Will we keep comfortably believing the big lie? And those questions are what the final paragraph of the section is about. In that final paragraph, the section moves from having made a series of general statements to finally addressing you as the reader and asking you a series of questions. So let's look at what that final section says. Final paragraph. Oh, wait, hang on. It says, how long, O Son of God, will you maintain the game of sin? Shall we not put away these sharp-edged children's toys? How soon will you be ready to come home? Perhaps today? There is no sin. creation is unchanged, would you still hold return to heaven back? How long, O Holy Son of God, how long? You may know the Bible asks in one of the Psalms, how long, O Lord? And then it goes on to say, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? So, in this brilliant and haunting passage, Jesus turns that around. We're not waiting on God to save us, we're waiting on ourselves. We can go home right now, today, if we will just stop playing this game. If we will simply realize that it was all a lie, that there is no sin, that everyone, including ourselves, is exactly as God created us, pure and perfect. Sin says that we can't go home. But if there is no sin, what is stopping us? Notice how he repeats how long 3 times in the first sentence, twice in the last sentence. I'll stop the screen share now. And the reason's obvious. We have been at this game for a very long time. Lesson 156 in the workbook calls sin a, quote, foolish thought, and then says, yet you have wasted many, many years on just this foolish thought. It's time for us to stop wasting those years. It's time to ask ourselves the section's final questions, at least a few of them, with great sincerity, knowing that we can save ourselves from a future of many more wasted years. So let's ask ourselves the following questions just as seriously as we can. So I'll state each question and urge you to ask yourself that question in your own mind. How long will I maintain the game of sin? If there is no sin, would I still hold return to heaven back? And finally, realizing that we are the Son of God, let's ask this final question of ourselves. How long, O Holy Son of God? How long? Thank you.